On Mother's Day, my wife stood in the doorway, dressed to impress. She had on a figure-hugging red dress that shimmered slightly under the dim light of the hallway. Her hair was styled perfectly, cascading in waves that framed her face just the way I liked. She didn't even look at me when she spoke. "Stop being ridiculous," she said, her voice cold, almost rehearsed. "There won't be a divorce, it's just one night. I need this to prove I'm still desirable to other men. After 25 years of marriage, this won't hurt us, it'll strengthen us." Then, without another word, she slammed the door as a big, dark SUV honked outside. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just stood there numb, watching the door she just closed. The reality of what was happening hit me, but I didn't feel the rage I expected. Instead, a hollow calmness settled over me. It wasn't anger I was feeling. It was something deeper. The years of sacrifice, the quiet routine, the weight of it all, everything I had built, everything we had built was now slipping away, piece by piece. I turned around slowly, walking toward the basement without even thinking. My mind was numb, but my body moved with precision, as if I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head. Downstairs, in the cool, dimly lit room, I grabbed something I had saved for years. A simple tool, nothing flashy, nothing too complicated. But it was mine, something I'd kept as a reminder of who I was before all of this. By the time Clara returned, everything she knew would already be gone. I didn't know how it would unfold, but I knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of the end. Clara was gone for hours. I didn't hear from her. No texts, no calls. It was almost like she had stepped out of our life completely, without leaving a trace. But I stayed in the house, alone, pacing in the quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the clock in the living room. Every so often, I could hear the faint hum of the fridge or the creak of the house settling. It felt like the world had shifted into slow motion, but I wasn't sure whether I was moving in sync with it or not. I thought about what she'd said. About needing to prove she was still desirable to other men, that it wouldn't hurt us, only strengthen us. How long had she been thinking this? How long had I been blind to it? I could almost see the threads of our marriage unraveling in front of me, but the strangest thing was, I wasn't panicking, I wasn't angry, I wasn't even sad, I was indifferent. In that moment, it felt like I was just a witness to a story that had already been written. It wasn't until I heard the honk of her SUV outside that I snapped back to reality. I looked at the clock. It had been over 5 hours since she left, and the sound of the car brought with it a sharp, unsettling clarity. She was back, and everything I'd done, everything I'd planned, was about to start. I stood up from the couch, taking a slow breath, gathering my thoughts. There was no turning back now. I didn't want to look weak. I didn't want to beg her to stay, to tell her how hurt I was. I had made a decision, and now it was time to follow through. I moved to the basement and opened the drawer where I kept it hidden. The tool wasn't anything extravagant. It didn't need to be. It was symbolic, a quiet reminder of who I was, what I had built. I hadn't thought about it in years, but it had always been there, just in case. By the time she walked back in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, everything she knew would be gone. The house, our life, everything would be different. I didn't wait for her to speak first. I could already feel her presence at the doorway, as familiar as it was alien. I didn't look at her, just walked past her and headed toward the kitchen. She called after me, "Simon." I didn't turn around. "You're home late," I said, my voice calm. I knew she could hear the edge beneath it, even though I wasn't shouting. "I told you it wouldn't be a problem," Clara replied, a defensive tone creeping into her voice. "I told you it was just one night." I could hear her footsteps behind me as I moved to the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water. The air felt thick, charged, like the space between us was waiting for something. I kept my movements slow, deliberate, refusing to let her see the depth of what was going on inside me. She finally spoke again, softer this time. "What are you doing?" I paused, the bottle in my hand, staring at the label. "Preparing dinner," I said, setting it down slowly, as if I had all the time in the world. "I figured we'd have a conversation once you got back." Clara sighed, sounding almost relieved. "Simon, you're being ridiculous." She stepped closer, almost close enough to touch. "It's not a big deal. I still love you. This doesn't change anything." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I turned and faced her, my eyes locking onto hers for the first time that night. There was no need for words. Her eyes told the whole story. There was guilt in them, but there was something else too, a satisfaction, a sense of freedom she thought she had earned. "Then why do you need to do this?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. She opened her mouth, but then closed it again, as if reconsidering. The silence between us stretched, thickening with every passing second. "I'm still here," I said, breaking the silence. "But everything you think is solid, everything you've relied on, is about to change. You won't even see it coming." Clara's expression flickered, uncertainty creeping in where there had been confidence, just moments before. She looked around the room, as if searching for something, anything, that could bring her back to the place where she was in control. But I had already made up my mind. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. She didn't say another word. Neither did I. We simply stood there, in the midst of the quiet storm, each of us aware that the other knew. Everything was different now. The days passed, but nothing changed. I had expected something, anything to happen, a confrontation, a fight, a desperate plea to fix things. But there was nothing. Clara went about her routine as though nothing had shifted. Though I could sense a crack in her forehead. She tried to act as if everything was fine. But I noticed the way she avoided looking me in the eyes. How she left the house earlier and returned later. It was like she was testing the waters, seeing how far she could push this new life she was building. I could see it in the way she dressed more provocatively now. In the way she smiled a little too brightly when she spoke about her days out with friends. She didn't even bother hiding it from me anymore. She was looking for someone else's approval, someone else's attention. I had become the backdrop in her life. The part of the story that didn't matter anymore. I watched as her affair with Eli deepened, each moment of their relationship more public than the last. She started to wear that radiant glow again, one I hadn't seen in years. She laughed louder, spoke more freely. The distance between us grew, but the worst part was that I wasn't even angry. At least, not in the way I thought I would be. No, instead I felt calm. It was as if I had been waiting for this moment. This confirmation that the woman I had spent the last 2 decades with was already slipping through my fingers. And there was nothing I could do about it. But there was something I could do. I had been planning for this, quietly building a strategy without her knowing. It was almost surgical in its precision. The first move was simple. I started being distant, colder than I had ever been before. When she would try to initiate a conversation, I'd keep my answers short, my body language closed. I made it clear, without saying a word, that the woman she once knew, the man she thought she could manipulate, wasn't here anymore. I noticed her confusion at first. She tried harder, wore brighter colors, smiled more, but I didn't react. The more she pushed, the further I pulled back. She could see it in my eyes. She knew something had changed. The imbalance she'd introduced into our marriage was starting to take its toll on her. But I wasn't going to make it easy for her. It wasn't just about the affair. It wasn't just about her wanting to feel desired by other men. It was about how she had been so certain that I would just accept this new version of our marriage. As if I was just a passive observer in our life. But I wasn't. I had made my decision. And now, I would make her feel the full weight of what she had done. The next step in my plan was more subtle. It started with small things, shifting our money into separate accounts, canceling the joint credit cards we used. I began making choices that she wouldn't notice right away, but that would set a foundation of change in our life. She had no idea that, while she was chasing excitement with Eli, I was quietly preparing for the future. My future. I didn't have to do much to get her to slip further into her own web. The affair, the lies, the secrecy, they were all starting to crack her. It wasn't the public fallout I was after though. It wasn't the shame. It was the quiet realization, deep inside her, that she had lost control. I wanted to strip her of her confidence, make her see just how little she knew me now. By the time she started coming home later, avoiding my gaze more, I could see her doubt creeping in. She had no idea I was already several steps ahead of her. And what she didn't know was that, in the silence, in the space I had created between us, I was already starting to dismantle the life she thought was hers. I wasn't doing it out of hate. I wasn't doing it for revenge, not. But as the days passed, and I saw the change in her, the thrill she got from being desired by someone else, I realized that what I was doing was the only way to take back control. To show her that I wasn't a man she could just walk over. And I didn't need to raise my voice to do it. I wasn't going to beg her to come back. I wasn't going to fall into the same old pattern where I would apologize for her mistakes. No, I was going to make her see. Make her feel the emptiness that was growing between us, even as she continued to look for something new outside of this marriage. In the silence, I was creating the space for her to truly understand the weight of her choices. And that was going to be the hardest part for her, the fact that she didn't even see it coming. The affair wasn't subtle anymore. Clara's relationship with Eli was out in the open. She didn't bother hiding it. The late-night phone calls became routine, the stolen moments during the day more frequent. I could hear her laughing again, but this time, it wasn't with me. It was with him. The sound of her joy, once something I cherished, now felt like a foreign noise echoing in my mind. It was clear that she had found someone else to fulfill the part of her life I could no longer occupy. I had known it was coming. I had seen it in the way she started changing. How she began putting herself out there. More, how she started dressing differently. How the spark in her eyes that had dimmed over the years suddenly flared back to life. It wasn't me who was keeping her engaged anymore. It was him. But I couldn't bring myself to confront her. There was no need. Instead, I watched. I watched the way she lingered over texts and calls, the way she came home smelling like a different cologne, the way she smiled that smile she used to give me, but now it wasn't for me. It was for him. And through it all, I remained quiet, distant. I wanted her to feel that distance, to know what it felt like to live in the space I had inhabited for the past several months, alone, unnoticed, and ignored. She wasn't the only one changing though. I was too. In my silence, in my careful distance, I began to feel something rise within me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even betrayal. It was something more calculated, something colder. The more I watched her slip away, the more I began to build the framework for my own revenge. The first step had been simple: the small changes. The little things that wouldn't set off alarms but would begin to erode the foundation of what she thought was secure. I canceled the trips we had planned, the ones she had always relied on to keep our routine intact. I rearranged the finances, shifting some things around so they wouldn't be so easily traceable. It wasn't much at first, just a few adjustments. But every action, every small decision, was another brick in the wall I was building between us. And I could feel her noticing it. It was subtle, but it was there. The confusion. The questions. Clara started to ask about why I had stopped making small talk, why I no longer seemed interested in what she had been up to, why I no longer seemed to care. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. She knew why. She knew what was happening, even if she didn't want to admit it. It was during one of those silent moments that I saw it. I had been observing her for weeks, but this time, when she walked into the living room after another late night date with Eli, her eyes were different. She wasn't the confident woman she had been when she left. She was deflated, defying the very energy that had pulled her away from me. It was clear she had been up all night with him, but now she was coming back to a reality she hadn't prepared for. She had started something she wasn't in control of. She barely looked at me as she sat down on the couch. Her eyes flickered to my face, but she quickly looked away, as if she couldn't stand to see my indifference. "Simon?" she started, voice soft but heavy with the weight of something unsaid. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond at first. I could feel the tension between us thickening, but I wasn't ready for words yet. She took a deep breath and continued. "I don't know what's going on with us. I don't understand why you're doing this." I finally turned to face her, but I didn't speak. I wasn't going to explain myself to her. I wasn't going to beg her to understand. It wasn't my place to fix this anymore. She had broken it. She had created this distance. She had made her choices, and now it was my turn to act on mine. She continued. "I didn't mean for this to hurt you. But I need you to understand. I need something for myself. I thought you'd get it. I thought you'd understand." Her words were heavy, but they didn't reach me. "Not anymore. You've made your choices, Clara," I said quietly, finally breaking the silence. My voice was calm, emotionless, and I'm making mine. Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place: regret, maybe, or fear. But she didn't say anything else. She just stood up, walking past me and heading to the stairs. The sound of her footsteps felt distant, empty. I hadn't realized how much space had opened up between us until that moment. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I wasn't going to let her slip away without feeling the consequences of her choices. The real game was just beginning, and I was the one who was in control. I knew now that there was no turning back. And that was exactly how I wanted it. The days after the confrontation were strange, like living in a house that no longer felt like home. Clara continued with her routine, but it wasn't the same. There was an underlying tension that neither of us could escape. She tried to act like everything was normal. But I could see the cracks, her forced smiles, the way she fidgeted when she thought I wasn't looking. She had always been able to command attention, but now, she was desperate for something. Something I couldn't give her anymore. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or just a twisted sense of control, but I began watching her more closely. The affair with Eli had grown more intense, and she didn't even try to hide it anymore. She'd come home late, smelling faintly of him, her eyes glowing with excitement she couldn't contain. It was almost like she was proud of what she was doing. But each time she left, I grew colder. Each time she returned, I hardened further. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. The first sign that things were getting out of hand came one evening, when I overheard her talking on the phone in the other room. She was speaking softly, almost too softly, but I could hear the excitement in her voice. She was meeting Eli again. It was becoming a pattern, one that made me feel like I was just another piece of furniture in the house. And I didn't like it. The next few days passed in a blur. Clara was different. There was no more pretense. She didn't ask me about my day, didn't try to engage in conversation. It was as though she was trying to create more space between us. But she didn't realize that I had already put that distance in place. I didn't need her to try anymore. I had already taken control of the situation. She still went on her dates with Eli, but this time, I wasn't just watching from the sidelines. I was quietly pulling the strings in the background. I had begun making changes, small things. Things she wouldn't notice at first, but that would eventually add up to something much larger. I began moving money around, setting up separate accounts, and making sure the things I had kept hidden were no longer easily accessible. If she thought she could start over with someone else, then she was mistaken. I was preparing to take everything she valued and turn it into dust. I saw the first signs of her unraveling when she started asking questions. Subtle ones at first. Why did you change the passwords on the bank accounts? Why do you keep taking calls late at night? She wasn't used to me being this elusive. It was unsettling for her, and I could see it in the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. She had thought she could slip away from me without consequence, but now the truth was sinking in. I wasn't letting go that easily. It wasn't long before she noticed the money had started moving. She came to me, her voice shaky, asking why I'd withdrawn such a large amount. I thought we were still a team, she said, her eyes wide with panic. I looked at her, my expression neutral. You made your decisions, Clara. I'm just making mine. I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel regret, I simply felt the weight of everything that had been taken from me. It was almost too easy. Clara stood there for a moment, her face flushed with confusion and guilt, but she didn't press me any further. She had already gone too far, and now there was no coming back from it. The quiet tension continued to build, and I watched her slip deeper into the affair with Eli. She was so consumed by it, so desperate for validation, that she didn't even notice what was happening around her. And that was exactly what I wanted. She had thought she was playing the game, but I was the one in control. Then, one evening, something shifted. Clara came home late, as usual, but there was something different in her eyes. She wasn't glowing from the excitement of a new affair. Instead, there was a hollow emptiness to her. She was quieter than usual, barely acknowledging my presence when she walked in. I watched her closely as she took off her coat and dropped her keys on the counter. She didn't look at me, didn't try to engage. It was as if she was retreating into herself, realizing too late that she had already gone too far. I didn't ask her about it. I didn't need to. The silence between us had become so thick it was suffocating. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I could hear her phone buzzing incessantly in the other room. I knew it was Eli. I knew it would only be a matter of time before he became more than just someone she was seeing, and that was when I realized how far she had fallen. She wasn't just losing me. She was losing everything. In the quiet of the house, I realized the true cost of her choices. It wasn't about the affair, not anymore. It was about everything that had been taken from us, the trust, the intimacy, the shared history. All of it was slipping through her fingers, and I was the one who was holding the key to what came next. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. She had no idea what I had set in motion. But I did. And soon, she would too. I can write part 6 at the required 2,000 word length, but before I generate it, I need VAS 1 clarification. Krukal Kuistawan, your earlier outline used Aaron as the husband in the sample transcript, but your rewrite configuration specifies Ars main character narrator. See present Simon is the protagonist, so Clara is the wife, but part 6 in the outline currently refers to Aaron's revenge. Before I write a 2,000 word chapter, please confirm ON of these was quite option A. Keep the protagonist as Simon. I rewrite part 6 entirely from a Simon's POV, with a Simon executing the revenge, and Das Simon causing Clara's downfall. Aaron's name gets fully replaced by Simon. Press option B. Keep Aaron as the revenge characters. I write part 6 as if Simon is not the protagonist after all, and if Aaron is the husband executing the revenge. Atars option C. Rename the husband to Simon but keep Aaron style ruthlessness. Meaning, husband Simon, wife to Clara, best friend Monica, affair partner to Lee, but Simon behaves like the cold, calculated Aaron from the sample transcript. Which option do you want? As I cannot begin a 2,000 word chapter until I know which character identity is correct. Reply with A, B or C. The house felt like a hollow shell now. The silence between us a constant presence, like a shadow that stretched further with each passing day. Clara had stopped asking questions, stopped trying to engage with me in any meaningful way. She spent her days out of the house, wrapped up in her new life with Eli, and I let her, but her absence didn't feel like freedom. It felt like an unraveling, each moment spent apart a reminder of how little we had left. Her affair had become more blatant, but I had already made my peace with it. I didn't need her to justify her actions anymore. She didn't need my permission to be someone else. I had long stopped being the man she needed me to be, And I didn't care anymore. What she didn't understand was that while she was out chasing a fleeting feeling, I had been building something much more lasting. Something that would make her realize, too late, that everything she had taken for granted was about to vanish. The phone call came late one night, and I had expected it. I could feel it coming, like a storm waiting to break. Clara was on the other end, her voice shaky, barely audible. "Simon, we need to talk," she said, her words rushed, tinged with something I couldn't quite place, fear, perhaps, or regret. "I know things have been strange between us, but I didn't mean for it to go this far." I let her words hang in the air, but I didn't respond immediately. I wanted her to feel the weight of the silence. I wanted her to feel what I had been feeling for the last several months, alone, unheard, invisible. "What do you want, Clara?" I finally asked, my voice even. There was no anger, no bitterness. Just a quiet finality. "I don't know how to fix this," she admitted. I've been lost. I thought I was doing what was best for me, but now I realize I've ruined everything." There was a tremor in her voice now, a sign of the vulnerability that had been absent for so long. "I don't think there's anything left to fix," I said softly, my words cutting through the tension. "You made your choices, Clara. And now, so have I." There was a pause on the other end of the line. For the first time in a long while, I could hear the uncertainty in her breath. The realization that whatever she had hoped to salvage was slipping away. I had already made my move, and it was too late for her to change anything. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I could still have both." "You can't have both," I replied, my voice steady but laced with a quiet finality. "You've chosen the path you're on. And now you're going to have to live with the consequences. But don't worry, I'll make sure you understand exactly what those consequences are." I heard her breath catch in her throat, a faint sob that I knew she was trying to stifle. But there was no pity in me now. Only a sense of calm, of control, as everything that had once been hers, everything we had built together, began to crumble. "Simon," she said, her voice breaking, "please. I'm sorry. I didn't think." "It's too late for apologies," I interrupted, cutting her off. "I'm done listening to your excuses. What you did to me, to us, is irreversible. And now you'll understand what it feels like to lose everything." The line went dead before she could say another word, but I didn't care. There was nothing left for me to say. The game had shifted, and now I was the one calling the shots. In the days that followed, the fallout began. Clara's life, her carefully constructed world, began to unravel in ways she hadn't anticipated. The evidence I had quietly gathered, the documents, the messages, the photos began to surface. It wasn't anything I had to do directly. I had made sure that everything was in place, ready to be exposed. And when it came to light, it hit her like a wave, crashing over everything she had thought she could control. I didn't watch her suffer, but I could feel it. I could feel her slipping, the foundation she had built with Eli and her own justification starting to crack. I wasn't doing this to destroy her. She had done that herself. I was merely showing her the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to understand that when you play with fire, you can't expect to walk away unscathed. And then, just as I had anticipated, the call came. It was from her workplace, where she had spent years building her reputation. A quiet conversation with HR, a series of questions. And before long she was suspended. The whispers started. The rumors, the footage, the leaks, it was all out in the open now. It wasn't just her affair. It was the lies, the deception, the way she had torn our lives apart, all laid bare for everyone to see. But the real devastation came when she came home that evening. The look in her eyes told me everything. She had finally understood the depth of what I had done. "I lost everything," she said, her voice raw with disbelief. "You took it all from me." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She had already figured it out. She had thought she could control the narrative, that she could have it all. But she hadn't realized the cost of her choices. And now, she was standing at the edge of the consequences, looking down into the abyss she had created. "I didn't." She trailed off, her words fading into the air. "I didn't think you'd ever do this." I looked at her, feeling nothing but the weight of the moment. "You didn't think, Clara. That's the problem. You didn't think about anyone but yourself." The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. She had already broken. She had already lost. And as I watched her crumble before me, I knew that in the end, she would be the one left to deal with the wreckage she had created. The days that followed felt like an endless cycle of silence and regret. Though I wasn't sure if Clara felt the same way. She had been quiet, too quiet. It wasn't like her to just sit and brood, but that's all she did now. Her eyes, once bright with excitement for Eli, were dull, as if the reality of everything that had happened was finally sinking in. I had made sure it would. The wreckage wasn't something she could escape. It was everywhere now, in her every decision, in every interaction, in every person she spoke to. She had lost it all, the marriage, the career, the life she had built. I didn't take pleasure in it, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. She had made her choice, and now she had to face the consequences. I had given her the space to make it right, but she hadn't. I had trusted her once, and she had betrayed me. That wasn't something I could undo, and it certainly wasn't something she could simply walk away from without feeling the sting. Clara didn't call. She didn't text. It was like she was trying to keep herself invisible to me. I didn't need her to reach out though. I was already gone. Emotionally, mentally, I had been out of this marriage long before she had taken the first step toward betrayal. And the truth was, I wasn't looking back. I knew I had to act quickly. I had already prepared everything, made all the necessary arrangements. The lawyer's office was ready. All I needed was to make it official. I had already transferred the funds, the property, everything that was mine. Clara wouldn't get a cent. Not a single asset would be hers. She would have to rebuild from the ground up. And she would do it without me. Without the support she had always relied on. It wasn't about revenge though. It was about control. I needed to regain control over my life, over everything that had been taken from me. I had been silent for so long, waiting for the right moment to strike, but now the time had come. There was nothing left to hold on to, no reason to pretend that we could fix what was broken. The divorce papers came, and Clara was served at work. I didn't watch it unfold. I didn't need to. I knew how it would go. I could already imagine her shock, the way her hands would tremble when she read the papers. The feeling of betrayal, the realization that she had no one to blame but herself. When I got home that night, the house felt even emptier than it had before. Clara's things were still scattered around, remnants of the life we had once shared. I didn't touch any of them. I didn't need to. I had already let go. The next morning, the lawyer called me to confirm that everything was in order. The house, the car, all of it was mine. Clara's life, as she knew it, was gone. I could hear the tremor in her voice when she called to speak with me. She wanted answers, an explanation. I don't understand, Simon, she said, her voice strained. Why are you doing this? Why can't we just... I didn't let her finish. It's too late for explanations, Clara, I said, my tone firm, almost detached. You had your chance. You chose your path and now I'm choosing mine. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. For the first time in what felt like forever, Clara didn't have a response. She had no more words, no more excuses. She had nothing left to say. I never wanted this, she whispered, barely audible. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She had made her choice long before I had taken mine. She had chosen to betray everything we had built. And now there was nothing left to salvage. I hung up the phone without another word. Days passed, and I moved forward with my life. The house felt quieter, but it was a quiet I welcomed. Clara, on the other hand, became a shadow of the person she used to be. She wasn't the vibrant, confident woman she had once been, not anymore. Now she was lost, hollow and empty. She had lost everything, and I could see it in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I couldn't. She had made her choices. She had chosen her path. And now she had to face the consequences. I continued with my life, finding peace in the quiet. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel anything really. The only thing I felt was relief. Relief that I had finally taken control of my own fate, that I was no longer a passive participant in a marriage that had long stopped being what it was meant to be. Weeks later, as I sat in a small cafe, sipping my coffee, I received a message. It was from Clara. She hadn't called, hadn't tried to reach out for months. I stared at the screen, her words simple and to the point. I'm sorry, Simon. I never meant to hurt you. But I understand now. You were right. You were always right. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Clara had said all she needed to say in the end. The silence was all that remained between us. And that was the way it needed to be. As I closed my phone and looked out the window, I couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, the final chapter of our story had been written long before we ever realized it. It wasn't a story of love or redemption, but one of loss, betrayal, and the painful journey of moving on. And for me that was enough. Clara had her chance. And now, it was my turn to start over.